Congressman, again, so happy to have you back on the Sara Carter Show. I want to just start off right at the top with Ilhan Omar. You wrote this incredible op-ed at SaraCarter.com, and it's called Omar Wants to Destroy the Very Government That Gave Her Safety and Success. And the reason I want to ask about this is because what we're seeing in America right now, the destruction of our urban cities, is actually something I never thought we'd see at this point in time. I mean, if you would have said this 6 months ago, I would have said, you're crazy. This will not happen in the United States of America. But unfortunately, the culmination of everything that's happened between the death of George Floyd and COVID has led to this point.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Those of us who are old enough to remember some of the riots in the 60s, and particularly the Chicago riot in conjunction with the Democratic National Convention, you just wouldn't have seen this coming because we had incredible prosperity. Then the COVID comes, and basically we have lockdowns, and the lockdowns kill our economy. But the thing about Ilhan Omar that's really, really bothersome to me, I'll just give you 2 or 3 quick points. Number one, she came here. Her father worked in a previous administration in Somalia, and they had been that regime was ousted, and they came as refugees to this country. Mm-hmm. And she ascends to the highest legislative body in the world. And this country, because of its greatness, its generosity, the society that we have, the government that foments and buttresses that society, because of that, we welcome refugees. And then she comes and she wants to tear down all of the systems, everything about this government, everything about our society, everything about our freedoms. And that's where she is. And she's advocating that from her lofty political position. And at the same time, I just have to juxtapose this for you, Sarah. Mm-hmm. Everything else that's going bad and crazy in the world today, in the United States that we're dealing with, and you're dealing with somebody like that, and somebody like Tlaib, who's been vicious to this president and this country, and Presley and the squad, and they're concerned about something that is not uncommon in a legislative body where passions are high, and where they assert that Congressman Yoho swore at Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
That's what they care about. They don't care about a speech that's advocating overthrow of the country, which is a direct violation of one's oath of office. They care about whether he used profanity toward Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Well, you brought up such a great point, because you're absolutely right. But it's something that they espouse. I mean, this idea of fundamentally changing the country. I'm going to play a quick clip here, and this is Ilhan Omar, and she calls for dismantling the United States economy and the political system.
As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it.
Dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it. This is so fascinating coming from Ilhan Omar, as you pointed out, who came to this country. This country opened up its arms like it does for refugees all over the world. We are the most gracious, most giving nation on earth. That is a fact. That is based on economics. It's based on statistics. We bring people into this country. We have 20 million possibly illegal immigrants living here that are still living here, that are being supported by this country. On top of it, the legal immigrants. And now we hear this from her. As you know, I think about this as John Lewis is your colleague. He passed away. He's a Democrat. Of course, we all don't agree on the same political issues, but he is an icon, a historical icon of the United States, part of a peaceful, pacifist, nonviolent movement with Martin Luther King for civil rights. And I hear this come out of Ilhan Omar's mouth, that she wants to just dismantle our nation, take it apart. And there is no other nation on earth like this. what do we do when people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Ocasio-Cortez are basically engineering this whole new form of government right before our eyes, and we've got a candidate for the presidency, Joe Biden, who's basically, as everyone has been saying, is going to be their puppet?
No, he will be their puppet. You know where this is all born? This is all born from critical race theory, which is a Marxian dogma. It's an offshoot of Marxism. And what it says is that Marx just missed it when he talked about economic class warfare, that the reality is in society it is racial warfare, racial class warfare. And that's an offshoot of the Frankfurt School, which again was people coming over here seeking refuge from Hitler and Nazism, coming over to the United States, and they brought this kind of dogma, which morphed into critical race theory. And so you've got Ilhan Omar and Presley and Ocasio-Cortez and Tlaib, and there are many, many others that the whole Black Lives Matter official organizational movement is all based on critical race theory. And that theory says that it doesn't matter what you feel in your heart, who you are as a person, or anything else. Everything is based on racial inequality. And so when you hear Ilhan Omar says we're going to have to tear down the system because we have to get this inequality and we care about who's making a profit. The beautiful part of what has always been America is we didn't care about who was making a profit. We didn't care about your speech. We let you have opinions and ideas and make choices. But when you start saying we're going to care about who is going to make a profit, we're going to care about who is receiving benefits from society and from our economy, when reality, the egalitarianism that is inherent in a free market system is going to be tossed out, and authoritarianism is going to replace it. That's what she's talking about.
How dangerous is this, Congressman? How dangerous is the situation right now? Because I am talking to people consistently in your state of Arizona. I've got friends there. I've got family there. I have friends all across the country that are so concerned about what's happening in our major cities. They're saying like, hey, well, look, in my small town, I'm not seeing this here, but I'm really scared it's going to show up in my city. I'm really worried it's going to show up in my town. This divisiveness, this anger. What do you think the result of this can be? I mean, do you see this getting worse? Or do you see the Trump administration being able to do something to kind of stop or quell the spread of this violence?
Well, Sarah, this is the perfect opportunity for those who want to foment violence and basically an overthrow of our system of government. And that is, you have the economic distress of the lockdowns as a result of the COVID. You have when that started happening, it created this social unrest. So you had you and I would never have thought that one individual who was killed by a police officer, who was immediately arrested, and all the other officers were immediately arrested and charged with very serious crimes. That's unlike most places in the world.
Right.
You never would have thought that the response to that would be riots and to tear down this country. That's why this is so dangerous. We've reached this apex of that movement, where they've taken something that was being handled through the system itself that they want to condemn, where people were arrested, being investigated, charged with crimes, and they will be punished if they're found guilty of those crimes. That is a system that works. They don't like that system.
Well, let's talk about
it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They do want to replace it. That's really frightening. And you did talk about something that I think we need to delve just a little bit deeper into, because it's such an important point, and it's the issue of the coronavirus and I guess the effort by our government and what we have done to try to mitigate the spread of it. But there's so much confusion, Congressman. There are so many people out there that are saying, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what mask to wear. I don't know what to believe. I'm worried that if I question anything, if somebody gets sick, that I'm going to be blamed for it. I'm worried about my grandparents. I'm worried about my children. I know right now, even for my school, my youngest goes to a private Catholic school. There's a big debate right now whether or not they're going to be wearing masks all day in class or not, because some parents want masks all day. The majority of parents, we had a little questionnaire that went out. So it's about, I think, 54% at our school right now don't want their children wearing masks all day. So that may take precedence. But a lot of the schools are shutting down here in Virginia, public schools, or rotating classes. We saw it in North Carolina. People feel utterly confused about this, worried about this. They don't know what to do. And I know you're one of the few people that has been willing to stand up and hold people accountable, like Dr. Fauci, like Dr. Birx.
Yeah, well, let's just face the facts. I mean, Drs. Fauci and Birx, I think, have engendered panic to a level in this country that I could not have imagined it we'd ever get. And with that panic and hysteria, people respond to that. People respond to incentives and concerns, and they're responding to these concerns. And so I look at the mask issue, and I feel like I've lost the mask issue, although this very morning I was looking at another lit review that came out just about 6-7 weeks ago, and it basically said there is no empirical evidence that shows that mask prevents the spread of clinically diagnosed influenza. In other words, there's no evidence that it's going to protect it. But because of what Fauci went through, and Fauci's gone all over the board, by the way. He's just been all over the board. People feel like if you're not wearing a mask, you're going to kill somebody. I've actually had somebody tell me that before. So you get this kind of hysteria out there, and because people are confused, just as you say, Sarah. When you say people are confused, they are confused. I look at the data in Arizona, and I'll just give you one little tidbit. They have now changed the way that they're counting beds, hospital beds, and hospital bed availability. Before they always, and this was a mistake on their part, they counted hospital beds that they had to set aside for the surge. So they had 650 for ICU and 2,000 beds for just general beds. They always counted those full. They counted them full. Even though those were surge beds. They weren't even online. They were meant to come online immediately if necessary. But instead of now, so they took those out of the picture. But instead of saying, well, we have these 2,600 beds available if we need them, plus the vacancy that are already there, which would give you a very accurate picture, which would actually decrease the number of COVID patients in hospitals to something like 24% in Arizona. They leave it there, which bumps, they'd leave that out. So they're not using that to divide into as the denominator. So you get a distorted picture. And so it adds to this hysteria. It adds to the confusion. And when people are confused and when they're concerned and have fears that actually seem rational, then you're going to have the lockdown's going to perpetuate. And as long as that lockdown perpetuates, the economy is going to be bad, and it's going to give opportunities for the left and for anarchists to try to exploit those opportunities against the country. And that's a problem, a huge failing of the bureaucracy in America today. And I lay that on Fauci and Birx. In fact, Dr. Birx said 2.5 months ago, she said, well, we're overcounting fatalities by at least 25%. Think of that, at least 25%. That's what she told us 2.5 months ago. And why were we doing it? It was her policy. It was her policy where she said, but you don't even have a mainstream media that is holding anybody accountable. Anybody who questions them is immediately ostracized. Anybody who questions them, if we say, well, that doesn't sound right, those numbers sound off, I'm not too sure about that, immediately you're ostracized. You want to kill someone. You don't care about human life. And it's so frightening to think that. I know I only have a little bit of time left with you. I want to ask you one more quick question. And I want to get your take on this because I think it's important. It's a question that everybody asks me. What's the worst case scenario with what we're seeing right now happening in our country? And what do you hope
happens so that worst case scenario doesn't come to fruition?
Okay, so the worst case scenario, and it begins politically, because policy begins with politics. And the politics here is if for some reason the Democrats were to be able to get unified government. I cannot tell you how bad that would be. First of all, you'd see implementation of just look at the first 5 or 10 bills that the House Democrats introduced. Those would become actual laws. They'd be the law of the land. Our economy would go belly up. And our supply chains that you already are seeing stressed would be continue to be stressed and maybe have more interruptions. And that means food supply, et cetera. You would continue to see this vilification of people who have contrarian points of view. And it would be vilification with legal attacks. So we saw that under Obama with the IRS pursuing conservatives. That would be expanded. We also saw it under Obama on political opponents, and that would be expanded. You would begin to see authoritarianism take hold in a way that's only reminiscent of something that from Orwell, Huxley, or the former Soviet Union, or even in China. That's really how serious this election is. Now, on the other hand, what I think is happening is I think Americans are starting to wake up and they're looking at the social unrest that's out there, and they're really ticked off. I think they're looking at the economy and saying Trump had a great economy going until we did this lockdown, and they trust him for the economy, and that's always so very important. So those things I think countermand and counterbalance some of the stuff that's going on the left. The stuff on the left is so radical. I mean, the Green New Deal. I mean, when AOC first introduced that, if you remember, her own chief of staff said, this has nothing to do with the environment. This has everything to do with control and remaking government. That's what that's about. So you have to realize that the counterbalance is maintaining the Senate and Trump, and maybe squeaking in with slight majority of Republicans in the House. Although that's a tough slog to get there.
So that would definitely be something that we should all be wishing and hoping for, is that we have some kind of balance in our government where we don't see it skewed all to one side with the Democrats in control. Because I believe, like you, Congressman, if that happens, we will see a change in our country fundamentally that I don't believe we will ever come back from. Thank you so much for being on the show with us. I know you're busy. I know you got to run off, and I'm so grateful that you took so much time to be here with us today.